Morning, but most mornings that I have the opportunity to wake my son Thomas up, it's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. I will begin by singing a song to him. Trevor wrote a song that we will sing when we put Thomas to bed at night, and because we're a liturgical family and we like tradition, it's the same song. And in the mornings I wake him up. I have not written a song, but it's a song that I learned in scout camp. Join me if you know it. Rise and shine and give God the glory, glory. Rise and shine and give God the glory, glory. Rise and shine and give God the glory, glory, children of the world. Yeah. It's a beautiful song, and there's verses in there that talks about Noah's Ark, and I just sing the refrain to Thomas as we begin our day together. And yesterday morning, as I brought him down into the kitchen, Trevor started singing too, and Thomas had this ear-to-ear smile on his face as we woke up and we gave God the glory. That song is based upon an African-American spiritual, We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladder. And you can go home and Google it or YouTube it to hear We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladder. I won't try to sing that one to you this morning at all, but it's also a really beautiful and profound song. But rise and shine and give God the glory is almost an exact quote from Isaiah chapter 60 today in our first verse. And it is a wonderful promise as we begin a brand new year, 4 days into 2026. During the season of Epiphany, and we began last week, our sermon series is God is Doing, God's Doing. And last week we talked about God's doing is both a noun and a verb. That sometimes we think of God as maybe just this static being who doesn't play an active role in our life, that God is just this noun. But in reality, God is also a verb, and that God is actively at work in our lives, doing a new thing. We see this on Christmas Eve when we celebrate the incarnation, that God is not just a God that is far off, but comes close and dwells with us, becomes one of us. And so last week we talked about how God's doing is both a noun and a verb, and this week we're talking about God's doing is renewal. And throughout this season of Epiphany, we are mostly focusing on the Isaiah passages, our Old Testament lessons for the season of Epiphany. I know that Sherry and Sam are here. Is your dad here? Oh, Chris, right here. Chris Johnson over here, who's one of our co-leaders for our confirmation class. Him and I were having a conversation last year, and Chris said, Pastor, we don't often spend a ton of time on our Old Testament passages. And so when I began to think through what is our sermon series going to be for 2026, Chris is laughing. You remember that conversation? And there are 4 lessons every Sunday, but today, during the season of Epiphany, we're going to focus mostly on our Isaiah readings in the Old Testament as we hear how is God doing a new thing all those years ago, today alive in our lives in this new year, at the beginning of the new year. But a little bit of historical context. When Isaiah the book is broken into probably 3 major sections, and Isaiah chapter 60 to 62 is really the core of the 3rd section of the book of Isaiah. Isaiah was written over multiple generations. You remember, if you were here on Christmas Eve, we talked about how after the Solomon's temple had fallen, the Israel and Judah kind of broke into 2. You had a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom or whatnot. We're a little bit further ahead now, and all of Israel, of Judah and Jerusalem, which is the capital of Judah in the south, have been in captivity, and they've actually been kind of dispersed. Some of them are in Babylonian, some of them are in Persia, others are in Assyria, and they're all kind of been dispersed. And for generations, no one can actually remember of the Israelites can remember a time when they were free and that they will not be held in bondage and slavery and being oppressed by these other nations. And then Isaiah comes onto the scene, and Isaiah begins with these first 6 verses from chapter 60 and begins to speak this word of hope and really renewal. Arise, for your light will shine. Arise. There's this renewal that is going to come, that while, yes, there is darkness covering all the earth, a light is going to come, and it is going to shine bright, and it is going to renew you. You are going to enter a new day. I think that the Israelites were experiencing what St. John of the Cross wrote in the 1500s, a dark night of the soul. Has God just simply turned the light switch off? And that he may not turn it back on. This dark night of our soul. I mean, how many of us here, some of you, I know last night on Saturday night, as I gathered with our Saturday night folks, are like, Pastor, it's only 3 days into the new year, and I'm already feeling overwhelmed. I had some high hopes for 2026, and I'm just kind of feeling already torn down. And, we saw the news yesterday of Venezuela and the president being captured. Last night on Saturday evening, one of our Saturday people has a really good friend who's ill and been hospitalized. And just 3 days in, and this morning, 4 days into the new year, it already feels overwhelming, not to mention all the griefs and the pain and the worries that we carried from 2025 into 2026. And sometimes we may find ourselves like St. John of the Cross, a dark night of our soul, where it feels like God has just switched off the light. What I love about Thomas, my son, is that no matter how long the night has been, and yesterday, not this past night, but 2 nights ago on Friday night, he slept for 13 hours straight, is that when I went in to wake him up at 8:30 in the morning, is he gave this beautiful smile, this ear-to-ear smile as I sang to him, rise and shine and give God the glory, glory. As this smile came on. And it is a beautiful reminder that no matter how dark the night is, we worship a God who renews us daily. We worship a God who has not just switched the light switch to off, but has came down to dwell with us and has permanently switched the light on. And that no matter how dark it feels, no matter how dark it seems to be, God has promised to renew and to refresh each of us. That was the promise that Isaiah was prophesying before the Israelites, and you can hear that why this is our reading for Epiphany Sunday of this beautiful incense, of this beautiful gifts of frankincense and myrrh, that Israel is going to be restored. Isaiah is promising that God is going to restore you, that even though right now it feels like everything is dark and it is miserable and you feel lost and forgotten and abandoned, that is not the case, for God is going to restore you. In Jerusalem, which is most likely where Isaiah was writing this prophecy, the capital of Judah in the southern kingdom, is going to be restored to its glory, and the temple is going to be rebuilt, and God's people are once again going to flourish. And it would be, because this was about 539 BCE, so about a little over 500 years before Jesus Christ would be born. And remember, there was no more prophecies between Malachi, where the Old Testament ends, and Matthew. There's about 400 years span of time there. But then we read from Matthew's gospel, the Christmas story, and Matthew begins by telling us about how Jesus Christ is the King of the world, and we see, you know this story, and we hear this promise that God continues to renew us, and that those magi following that star all those years ago, when Jesus is no longer a newborn or an infant, but is now a young child, probably 2-3 years old, as they come to worship him, have this incredible promise, and they understand with great joy, our reading says in Matthew. They are filled with great joy at knowing, maybe not necessarily fully understanding, but knowing that this star has led them there, and that they are then warned in a dream to go back another way because King Herod is up to funny business, and they give thanks to God. And that is the same for us today. That as we begin a new year, God is in the business of renewing us. That God is in the business of shining the light into the broken places in our life, where there is darkness, and offering God's light. Several years ago, Trevor traveled to Barcelona for a work conference, and I says, I'll come along with you. I have some vacation time, and I was in my previous congregation, and so I flew to Barcelona with him, and we had the opportunity to take a tour of Sagrada Familia, which is the big cathedral in Barcelona they've been working on for like 600 years or whatnot, and it's still not finished. And instead of taking a public tour, I ended up meeting at the clergy vestment shop outside the cathedral, where I had 2 chasubles made for me. Somebody who says, well, I can hook you up with a tour of the cathedral, that instead of the public tour, if you want, we can do a little private tour. And so I said, sure, why not? Well, this is the only time I'm probably going to be here before this cathedral is finished, since it's supposed to take like a long time still. And I remember that as we went up one of the spiral staircases to one of the overlooks in the cathedral, the sun was beginning to set over the Mediterranean Sea and over the city of Barcelona, and the different colors and images that played out from the stained glass windows into the nave, which is where the congregation sits, the upside down boat looking part. And there's the wooden beams that look like a forest. And it was one of those moments where you just feel God's love, where you could only ever see this view at sunset, because you get a different view at sunrise in the cathedral. And I love that image. I wish I had had a good iPhone back then to take the image of that photograph, because I think that is such a beautiful image for how each of us are called to be the light in the world. What I love about stained glass windows when you go into ancient cathedrals and where the places that have them is that if you look at just one color, you don't see the bigger picture. It's when you back up and you see the light through the entire stained glass window that you see the image, that you can see the colors and the vividness and the brightness. And that is the same for us. Well, Jesus Christ is a light to the nations. Each of us have a part to play in reflecting that light. As Lutherans, we do not believe that it is our job to save the world. It is not our job to be Jesus and to save the nations. Rather, as Lutherans, we believe that it is our job to reflect the one who is the light to the nations to the world in ways that they can understand and in ways that they can grasp. And that where the world is hurting, it is our job to proclaim a word of peace and hope and love in reflecting God's glory and light to the world. That each of us are a different color of the stained glass window that is God's family. And that we are to live our lives as a church. We are to be a place that shines. And when you go to really ancient cathedrals and churches that have stained glass windows, you sometimes see with a stained glass, because it has contracted and expanded so many times, have developed little cracks. And it may not be perfect as it once was or as intended. still shines light through, and that through our brokenness, God's light still shines and makes this kaleidoscope of colors. And that is us, dear church. That at the beginning of this new year, where we are 4 days in, and where it sometimes feels like the world is falling apart at its seams, and we are left with questions and frustrations and confusion and anger and all of the emotions that we feel, because they are all gifts from God. We get to be the kaleidoscope of light, sharing God's love in the world. And that we, like the Magi all those years ago, get to bring the gifts that we have been given, to lay them at the feet of Jesus, and to hear that we are God's child, to hear that this is my body and this is my blood given and shed for you, and are then sent out to share the one who is the light. And so if you make any intentions this year, any hopes or goals this year, could it just be that each morning, each new day, where when the sun is shining, we need our sunglasses, or even when it's an overcast day out, that we rise and shine and give God the glory, glory. Join me. Rise and shine and give God the glory, glory. Rise and shine and give God the glory, glory, children of the world.